911, what's your emergency?
Breaking news tonight. Authorities are warning the public not to take Tylenol.
No consuma Tylenol. Las autoridades advierten a los consumidores
Ne consume pas de Tylenol.
La autoridad invita a...
How long does it take you to open a bottle of medicine? Sometimes it feels like a test of patience. First the child-resistant cap, then the plastic band around it, and finally the aluminum seal pressed against the neck of the bottle. Only then can you take your pill. It's tedious, especially when you're in a hurry or your headache makes it hard to think. But the truth is, those layers, those little annoyances, those extra seconds, might actually be saving your life. It sounds dramatic, but modern medicine bottles are nothing like the ones from 40 years ago. Back then, all you needed was a simple glass or plastic bottle with a twist-off cap and a cardboard box. That was it. Easy to open, easy to tamper with, and tragically vulnerable. And if you've ever wondered why everything changed, the answer is much darker than you think. It all began with a simple headache in 1982 in Chicago. The first victim was Mary, a 12-year-old girl who woke up feeling unwell and asked for a Tylenol before going to school. For her family, it was something normal, something routine. Mary took a capsule and, within minutes, began to feel dizzy, nauseous, confused, until she collapsed. Her father called emergency services without understanding what was happening. She was a healthy girl, no medical issues, and suddenly she was fighting for her life. While the ambulance rushed toward her home, a few miles away, another family was living through a day filled with grief. They had gathered to mourn a loved one. Among the tension and exhaustion, Adam, a 27-year-old man, took a Tylenol to relieve a migraine. He sat down, breathed deeply, swallowed a capsule, and seconds later collapsed in front of everyone. A second ambulance sped toward that house. Hours later, the news arrived that Adam had died. His devastated family gathered again to comfort each other. No one imagined the danger was sitting inside the same bottle Adam had opened. His brother and sister-in-law, both with headaches from the stress of the day, each took a capsule. Minutes later, they began feeling ill, weak, confused, losing control of their bodies. A third ambulance was dispatched to the same address. The driver thought it had to be a mistake. He had already been there twice that day. 3 young people collapsing in the same family, in a single day, with no explanation. While this unfolded, across Chicago, a woman named Maria, who had given birth just weeks earlier, felt a normal postpartum pain. Her doctor had told her she could take painkillers when needed. She opened a bottle of Tylenol, took a capsule, and lay down beside her baby. Shortly afterward, she began struggling to breathe and lost consciousness. With 4 nearly identical cases in one day, authorities knew something was terribly wrong. Doctors said it clearly. 3 sudden deaths in the same young family were not normal, and another healthy woman collapsing the same way wasn't either. But no one yet knew which product was responsible. That same day, another woman didn't see the news in time. 31-year-old Mary McFarland, a mother of 2, was at work when she felt a sharp headache. She pulled out a Tylenol from her purse, like she always did. Minutes later, she collapsed in front of her coworkers and died shortly after. No one had any answers. Meanwhile, Paula, a United Airlines flight attendant, returned to her apartment after an exhausting flight. She had spent hours assisting passengers and dealing with delays. On her way home, she stopped at a pharmacy to buy a fresh bottle of Tylenol. Security cameras recorded her paying and placing the bottle in her bag. That night, she took a capsule. She did not survive. By then, chaos had already taken over. On the afternoon of September 30th, police cars began driving through neighborhoods with loudspeakers, warning people not to take Tylenol and to throw away any bottle they had at home. The news exploded on television and radio. The streets were filled with fear. People who had taken a capsule by accident rushed to hospitals, terrified they might collapse at any moment. Phone lines were overwhelmed. No one knew how many bottles were contaminated. No one knew how many more victims there could be. What investigators discovered was horrifying. Someone had walked into stores, opened bottles of Tylenol, replaced normal capsules with cyanide-laced ones, and put the bottles back on the shelves. This wasn't an accident. It was a cold, calculated crime, committed by someone who was never identified. Pharmacies flooded with people returning products. Shelves emptied out overnight. Suddenly, something as ordinary as a pain reliever, something millions of people used without thinking, had become a hidden threat. Johnson & Johnson ordered more than 30 million bottles off the market, one of the largest product recalls in history. Authorities knew only a handful of bottles were actually contaminated, but no one could take the risk. Officially, there were 7 victims, but many believe that elderly or already sick people who took Tylenol around those days may have died, with their deaths attributed to other causes. Despite a massive investigation, no one was convicted. James Lewis, the man who sent a letter extorting the company, went to prison for extortion, not for the murders. There was no evidence linking him to the bottles. Other theories emerged: a lone tamperer, an imitator, a resentful pharmacy worker, even suspicions toward people connected to the Janus family. Nothing was ever confirmed. The case remains unsolved to this day. What did change was the entire pharmaceutical industry. After the Tylenol case, the FDA required all medications to have safety seals, plastic bands, fully closed boxes, and visible tamper warnings. Johnson & Johnson replaced capsules with tablets, which are much harder to alter. And surprisingly, the company regained nearly all of its reputation in less than a year because of how quickly and transparently it acted. By 1983, Tylenol was once again at the top of the market, and their crisis response became a global example. The financial impact was enormous. Johnson & Johnson lost over $100 million just removing and replacing their best-selling product, but they accepted the loss to help stop the panic. Investigators worked to build a profile of the culprit. Everything pointed to an intelligent man with basic chemistry knowledge and some kind of resentment toward institutions or corporations. Someone capable of walking into stores, choosing bottles at random, tampering with them, and disappearing without being noticed. No one knew who he was, but everyone agreed on one thing. Whoever did it knew exactly what he was doing, and vanished without a trace. The psychological impact was just as deep. That same year, many cities canceled Halloween, trick-or-treating, out of fear of tampered candy. There was no evidence of such tampering, but the fear was already planted. The idea that something so ordinary could hide a silent danger marked an entire generation. In early 1983, the victims' families filed civil lawsuits against Johnson & Johnson, arguing the bottles were not secure enough and that the company should have prevented tampering. But in 1982, no law required safety packaging. Legally, the company had done nothing wrong. Still, they reached private settlements with the families as a humanitarian gesture. The amounts were never made public, and so, one of the most unsettling tragedies in modern history ended with a terrified nation, a company struggling to rebuild, families left with questions that would never be answered, and a criminal who vanished without leaving a clue. A case that didn't just change how we open a bottle of medicine. It changed how we trust the small, everyday things in our lives. There were no witnesses. There were no survivors. The victims didn't know what was happening, and neither did we. The Tylenol case became a story where, quite literally, no one survived to tell.